questions. We will save the questions for the end. So thank you very much, David, and thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you to both you and Annie for looking after everything so well. And thank you, everyone, for also joining me on this beautiful sunny day. I always kind of wonder who's going to win, the weather or myself, so or my program at least. So it's always interesting when that goes on. And yeah, just looking forward to sharing Exploring the Birds of Ontario 2 today. I can't remember, it was quite a while ago when I shared Exploring the Birds of Ontario 1, and obviously that was back in person as well too, which was a real treat. But fortunately, we do have the virtual aspect now that is, I consider it to be the second best thing to you know, being in person. And so I have already put some websites in the chat for excellent bird websites, as well as apps that I use. I'll probably talk about them in the question period as well too, and then also the binoculars of choice by many birders as well. That's 8 by 42 times, so that's the best binoculars out there. So without further ado, I'll get started here and sharing the screen. So first one I'm going to start off with here is the indigo bunting. So the indigo bunting is one of my favorite songbirds, and it looks more like a bluebird, and but it is that indigo color, and has the feathers are actually more of a traditional brown color, but because of the way the sun refracts off the feathers, all the other light goes through, but the blue gets scattered, and that's why on the males you see such that brilliant blue to them. Then we have the scarlet tanager, and they're just about on their way back. They should be on their way back now and appearing anytime in the first week of May. Maybe this year, a few days before the start of May as well too, because forget about the snow, but the weather has been milder for the most part this month. And then there's the orchard oriole, and we're fortunate to live in the Niagara region because in the lower Great Lakes like Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, we get to see the orchard oriole compared to most of the rest of the country doesn't get to see them. It's generally in southern Manitoba that you get to see the odd orchard oriole again as well too. And when it comes to the rose-breasted grosbeak, if you want to draw them to your yard, potentially sunflower seeds is a great way to see them, as well as the fact that, you know, if you are out in the woods and you do see them, generally they will come down to lower levels on colder days because of inclement weather. If it's a little colder, it'll force them to feed in the lower part of the canopy of the trees, whereas they usually stay much higher. And then there's the eastern bluebird as well, and I see them generally all throughout the year in the Niagara region, but more commonly, of course, they start coming back in late March, April, and May. So if you're driving through the country, keep an eye out for those nesting boxes, as well as them sitting on maybe fence posts, the odd wire as well too. And we're going to move on to woodpeckers. That's the red-headed woodpecker there. And then one of my favorites is the yellow-bellied sapsucker. So you can see this one. Basically, what's neat about them is the fact that they actually have a hyoid tongue. So they actually have a bone that's inside their tongue that actually wraps all the way around their skull, because when you do all that hammering on trees, it's bound to potentially long-term create some brain damage. So they now have obviously protection for that as well too. And you're looking at one of the juveniles. Another neat thing about them is they drill little wells at the bottom of trees that also gather insects. They're not so much after the sap, but the sap draws the insects, and then they eat the insects themselves. Then there's the red-bellied woodpecker. The red-bellied woodpecker was one that was actually south, or not in the Canada, but it's slowly expanding its range north into southern Ontario. And then the downy woodpecker is generally the first woodpecker that we see. And the difference between them and the hairy woodpecker, which you'll see next here, is their bill is shorter than their head, whereas the hairy woodpecker, it's about the same length or even a bit longer. Now, one of the fascinating things about both downies and hairies is just how similar they look. But when the young actually have longer bills, and this is for all woodpeckers, longer bills than the adults. So that's kind of a, when you see the young with the adults, it kind of looks funny because of the fact that the little ones have larger bills. Then there's the northern flicker. You can usually hear them doing their call at this time of year. But if you hear kind of a rattling high call, almost like a laugh, and that is generally, could be them at the, and look high up in the tree, because they generally do that, especially any trees that are dead as well. Then there's pileated woodpeckers or pileated woodpeckers. They are the largest woodpeckers in all of North America. Here's the red-breasted nuthatch, and it is one that you'll see kind of go up and down the trees. Basically, you'll go underneath branches. It's kind of like the Spider-Man of the bird world. And then the evening grosbeak is part of the winter finches that sometimes come down into southern parts of Ontario and throughout the US. Basically, they stay in the boreal forest for the most part, and they're very eruptive. They can be in the Western Canada one year and then Eastern Canada the following year. It's basically where the best food crop is available. Same with the pine grosbeak is another one that generally, if you have maybe crabapple tree in your yard, they might come down and basically eat a lot there and then leave, but they also will come for sunflower seeds too. But like I said, very eruptive. Basically, Algonquin Park is probably your best chance of seeing them during the winter. Now, as for the brown creeper, I've seen them quite a bit in the Niagara region, and they will basically start at the bottom of a tree and work their way up, looking inside, fitting that bill and tongue into the crevices to feed on insects. Same with the purple martin. They're not so much their feeding technique, but they love to eat their insects, and you can often find them around water areas. And if you see a kind of what looks like a condo of bird holes and a big kind of birding box, generally that's the typical purple martin condominium, basically. And so they'll congregate, they'll have multiple nests going on at the same time too in that. And sometimes the odd house sparrow will share with them as well too. And then we have the tree swallow. Tree swallows are fairly common across most of southern Ontario. Again, keep an eye out for nesting boxes. And again, they have that kind of real nice, either kind of violet color, blue at times. It just depends how the sun is hitting them. And then there's the northern rough-winged swallow as well too. They're more of a kind of the typical brown tones overall. And the barn swallow, it does sound like it nests in barns, which they do utilize barns, but they'll also go into those little pavilions where you have the basically the overhang picnic tables underneath. They'll sometimes nest in there as well too. And the pine siskin is another one that is here actually at times all year round. It's just they become very secluded during the spring when they're nesting. And but if you do get them in the winter, it's generally Niger seed is what they prefer to feed on, and you'll get that little bit of a yellow stripe on the side. And the Bohemian waxwing. The Bohemian waxwing is one that they congregate, and again they'll feed on crab apples as well too. So now, as we're going to look at some of the habits here of the for example, the eastern bluebird. And this eastern bluebird is your typical male, but the female is beautiful as well too. Often in nature, we see that the female has more of the colors that blend in. And it's very important because of the fact that she's the one that sits on the nest. So therefore, the last thing you want to have is brilliant colors and potentially drawing attention to yourself. And one of their kind of hunting techniques for food is basically to sit up on a post or a tree limb, and if they see something down below that moves that catches their eye, so a vertebrae or an insect, they'll swoop down and basically capture it and eat it. Sometimes they go back to their perch, or they'll eat it right down on the ground as well too. There's the gray catbird, and we'll talk a bit more about it later on. But yeah, we're going to take a look. Here's an example that kind of the condo of purple martins here. And what's neat is a lot of the time they're in the air and they feed on insects. So you'll hear you'll see the aerobatics, but they also make some really cool noise. or like Star Wars, I guess you could technically say. And tree swallows, something I did not realize, when you think of all those nesting boxes out there, you don't think of competition for them as being as hardcore as this is right here. So for example, this tree swallow, you can see a little bit of blood on the chest there, and they're basically competing with another couple that wanted that specific box. So you can see kind of the squabbling going on here, but it was just something I'd never seen myself, but it made sense because when I've walked past tree swallow boxes a bit too close, I've had some of the one of the adults basically dive bomb at me as well too. Here's some bloopers. I just like to throw that in there because sometimes professional photographers or videographers don't like to show the mistakes, but I like to show that it happens, and more so than we'd probably like to admit. But you can sometimes get some funny bloopers. The cardinal goes down and then trades up for a house finch there. And we're going to look at our provincial bird here as well, the common loon. So we saw it in its typical breeding. What I like to see them in is also their secondary, which is the non-breeding. And this is in the fall. And one of the neat things is they have those red eyes, and it's believed that that actually helps them basically see underwater better and catch their, potentially catch small fish and other things that are deep under the water. And their bones are also not as hollow as ducks, for example. So that's why they sit a little bit lower in the water. And you can see this one here basically skimming along the surface because the lake itself is not that deep. So therefore it kind of skimming for its food instead of the usual diving. And they like to breed on lakes that are quite deep because they often offer the food they need. And we're going to take a look at mallard ducks. Generally, they're the first ducks that we ever get to experience, whether it's at the local park or a field trip, maybe in school and that. So here's an example of the hen as well as the little ones here. And so they do stay together for one breeding season, and then the following year, the drake and the hen usually find different partners. And then there's the American black duck as well, so very close to the mallard duck, and so much so that the male mallards have been known to basically breed with the American black duck females. That's why their numbers are actually shrinking in southern Ontario a little bit as well. But northern Ontario is still very healthy populations. And here is the gadwall duck. You can see the drake and then the hen there. And something that I found fascinating was I did not realize that mink would actually hunt ducks as well too. So more so in the winter, but they'll actually catch the duck from coming up underneath it, and then they'll basically try to bring it underneath the water and suffocate it. So it was something that surprised me on that aspect when I read about it. And hooded mergansers. Hooded mergansers, you can see that beautiful crest. So here's an example. One male has it flared, and then the male in the front there has it down. So you can see that dramatic difference between the two. Then we have the common merganser, and this is the northern shoveler. And you can see the name is very self-explanatory there. Basically has that kind of shovel-like beak. It's also called some people call it the long-billed mallard as well. That's been another name for it. And there's the blue-winged teal ducks, so they have a little bit of blue on their wings as well as the white kind of sash in front of the eye there. And there's also the green-winged teal, which has kind of a nice little funky hairstyle there, but you like the green behind the eye. And they are generally small, quite a bit smaller than the mallards. If you see them together, you'll see quite the size difference. And I love the wood duck. The wood duck is one of my favorites. The brilliant colors in the sunlight, as well as just that hairstyle or feather style on both the male and female. Then there's the northern pintail. You can see them sometimes just a single couple, or sometimes you can have them in the thousands, especially in migration over Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And then there's the bald eagle, and they will hunt in the winter as well, the ducks. So the Niagara River is often where I see the bald eagles as well as ducks during the winter months. So if you're ever driving the parkway there, it's a fantastic spot to see both ducks as well as bald eagles. And snowy owls are also known to hunt ducks as well as gulls, especially when they're down in the Great Lakes area. Then there's the pied grebe, or some people call them grebes. And you can see here the redneck grebe. And yeah, they're quite fascinating. Bronte Harbor, there should actually be a couple there now where they will be nesting nesting there, and they are quite spectacular when they do their courtship dance. They basically look exactly the same, and they go together. Sometimes they look like they're going to turn on each other as well too. They're quite aggressive with other ducks and waterfowl as well too, with pushing them out of their area. And you just saw American black ducks there. Here's a close-up view of one here. So this was at the Dufferin Islands, just south of Niagara Falls. A great location again during the winter to see these characters. And there's that's a female common merganser. It has the red head. I actually like the female common merganser a bit more than the male because it has that beautiful red head. And then here's a couple ruddy ducks. So when I was taking video of them, I'd often go to one end of the pond, and then I'd go back to the other, and I felt like we were playing a bit of just a bit of a chase there. Then we have the hooded mergansers here, so it just gives you a little bit of idea. There's the female, couple males, and then another female, and then this will give you a bit of a size comparison with the mallards there. So again, you can just see that size advantage when it comes to them. So they can often move other ducks out of the area too. And then we have the American coot, and you look at those feet. You can understand why they're a little bit awkward on land, and you'll get to see a better example of that in a moment. They look quite graceful in the water, a bit of a head bobbed as they kind of move forward there, and they are divers for what they're basically feeding on. But when you'll see here in a moment where this one actually starts to walk across stones. I mean, sometimes even myself, I'm not the most graceful on stones, but when you got big feet like this, it's got to be a little bit trickier. Yeah, you'll see it right at the end here, kind of a bit of a stumble there. And horned larks, I usually start seeing them back in the Niagara region as early as late January, early February. And so if you really want to be optimistic, I always say that could be the first signs of spring, but generally it's your red-winged blackbird as well as the robin that most people look at as your first signs of spring. We have the bobolink, and they will be coming back. Well, they're on their way back, but should be here anytime soon, probably the first week of May as well too. And they tend to nest in fields. There's the female there. So farm fields, and farmers have actually been doing fairly well for actually trying to move around their nest. It's their numbers are shrinking, but there's work to have it that they're not you know, trying to skip the breeding season at least and miss the eggs when they are plowing or cutting the hay in their fields. Now, as for the gray catbird, they are ones that if you look in the woods and you're hearing what sounds like a cat, but you can't see one, generally it is likely a gray catbird, especially if you see a grayish bird actually fly out. Then there's the eastern meadowlark. You may be hearing some of them right now, and they should be passing through as well, often on fence posts, but baseball diamonds is another area, and soccer fields that I've seen them in quite a bit as well too. There's the purple finch. So the purple finch is one that feeds on Niger seed, and I generally see them more so in the winter and early spring before they become a little bit more secluded. You can't really find them as well. And then there's the dark-eyed juncos. Generally, whenever you're hiking a trail in the Niagara region that you can be walking, if there's vines there, they'll scatter about and they'll make their little kind of pium 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 sounds as well too. Snow buntings are ones that I generally start seeing in November, more so maybe December down here, and then they'll be here till generally February. And cornfields are an area where I see them quite a bit. And with that contrast of the blue sky, if they're flying across, it's beautiful to see, especially when there's over 1,000 of them. But it's a real treat whether there's 25 of them or 1,000 of them, especially with that contrast of the sky. Then we have we're going to look at sparrows here. So we're looking at the American tree sparrow. They are like the snow bunting, kind of the Arctic and the tundra. And that's where they breed, but in the winter they come down here and they'll often feed on grass seeds as well as some berries too. There's the chipping sparrow, and it was actually more common in urban areas at one point. It was the most common sparrow in urban areas, but because of the house sparrow has actually been one to push kind of more aggressive and has pushed it out. So it's more in the countries now than it used to be. There's the field sparrow, and kind of like its name, you can find it around woodland edges with an open field. And that's generally what I've been, my best luck for seeing field sparrows has been. Here's probably the one of the most populated sparrows of North America that was here before the house sparrow, and that is the Savannah sparrow. So it has the yellow brow above its eye. There's the song sparrow. It's generally another one that when I'm in the Niagara region, I can pretty much stop anywhere, and if there's small shrubbery or vines or something like that, wild vines, then you'll often see them there too. And then there's a swamp sparrow. So just like its name, I often see them in kind of marshy areas as well. And then here's the white-throated sparrow, and it's one of my favorites. It has such a strong song that you kind of listen to it and you go, wow, that's coming from such a small bird. And there's the white-throated sparrow, but there's also this tan morph as well. So same species, but it has kind of a tanned throat as well as a tanned eyebrow. And the white-crowned sparrow, it should be pretty much have passed through the area now. Maybe actually still maybe another week or two of seeing them. And we're just going to take a look at a bit of video here. Here's probably the first fall for this little song sparrow here. So you can kind of see the different flecks on the chest there and different kind of scattered patterns. So it's always easier to kind of tell when you're dealing with an immature bird in general. And you'll get to see a bit more of that in a moment anyways. Here's the eastern towhee, or also some people call it the eastern towhee. And they are actually part of the sparrow family. And you can see that beautiful kind of brown roughest colors on the side there. And one of the ways to draw them, and so this was taken in the first week of May. And a way to draw them is if you walk across one in the wild, and if they're staying kind of in one area, it's likely that they're going to breed there. So what I do is I'll kind of squish the leaves or grass below me, because that's actually how they feed. And they will move leaves and clutter and then eat what's below that. So something that you can do to kind of draw them in a little closer, or at least get them to perch up a little higher, is do the same thing, because it sounds like there's another one in their area, and they're just naturally curious as well too. So that's a little trick that I did to keep getting good views of that one. And here's some of the immature birds as well too. So here's your northern mockingbird. There's a youngster catbird, so fledgling, probably that's August at that point, so probably about 3 months old. There's an immature red-winged blackbird. You see a very small orange patch, and this oriole I actually had to take a peanut feeder down, because they usually feed on oranges or sugar water, and that one seemed to have a appetite for peanuts, so I had to take that down for a couple of days. And you can see here we have a more mature red-winged blackbird, so it's starting to develop a larger patch. And then the common grackle here, with a style like that, maybe that's only a face a mother could love at that point. Definitely an awkward teen stage maybe for that one. And you saw the house sparrow as well. Just quite the funky styles at that point. So we're looking at a nest here of great horned owls, and the owlets are in the nest here. And what's funny is you saw that kind of panting there, and that's actually how they cool down. They don't sweat, so they pant, and that naturally cools them down, because birds are actually about 20% of their body is made up of lungs. Then we have the red-tailed hawk here, the little ones here, and that's the same nest only a year later. So they tend to alternate, because the great horned owls don't add to the nest, whereas the red-tailed hawks do the upkeep. They maybe add to it as well as fix it up. So often if I've found a nest of owls the year after, especially great horns, it'll be red-tailed hawks in the place. So it's kind of neat to see the switching back and forth, and that if it's a well-structured nest, I've seen a few great horned owl nests that are year after year, it's the same couple there, or one of the juveniles from the past that have come back to the same area too. So we're going to take a look at the process here. So this is around the end of February, early March. So this is the male. He's about 100, probably about 100 yards away, so 75 meters away from the nest. This is what they will feed on, is squirrels as well, especially during the day when I've seen them bringing their catch back to the nest. And yeah, at that time of year, we all know that it can be quite rough, cold, snowstorms and all that type of thing as well too. So you can see squirrels are still out at that point, but for the female, she has to stay on the nest at that point. So She has to bear all the weather and they're actually 25% larger than the males, because when that inclement weather comes, especially if the young have already hatched and they got a bit of size to them, it allows her to spread herself out. Whereas the male here, the winds were out of the northeast and he was on the southwest side of the tree. So he was able to give himself some protection. Fortunately, the storm did pass, so it gives her a bit of a break, as well as the male. He's more so out in the open. So at this point, the female is staying on the nest and the male is the one that brings the food back to the nest. And you can still see she's sitting quite low at this point. So there's not likely any egg, or there's eggs out, but there's no little ones yet. Now she's sitting a little higher at this point. So it takes about 28 to 35 days for the incubation period to basically take place. And then the little ones, before they fledge, is generally another 20, I've seen it vary between 25 and 32 days. So there's, again, the male will tend to sit in a pine tree or something that has a little bit more protection or camouflage with it. And again, now you can see she's sitting a lot higher. So I do believe at this point, this would be about maybe the second week of March, she has actually got some little hatchlings or little ones. And again, you can see her getting higher as the month goes on. So when they turn their head, one of the neat things about it is the fact that they have a special area in the back of, kind of in their spine, in the back of their head there, that it pools blood, because of the fact that if they can turn their heads 270 degrees. So when they do that, of course, that would, for us humans, that would cut off the circulation to our brains. But for them, they have that special area that pools the blood. So it allows them to do that without having any ill effects. So because their eyes are actually tube shaped, so they can't move their eyes. So the only way they can adjust is turn their heads. Now, as for this one here, this was a different nest, same year. And what I found fascinating was there was only one little one in the nest, and the fact that they had nested on the north side of the woods. So it didn't really offer a lot of protection. So I was curious on maybe that's why there was only one successful little one in that particular nest. One playing peekaboo with me, and one of the neat things about them is they are very still. They stay very still compared to other birds that I've been close to, especially young. For example, in my first program that I shared, there's a robin that knows that I'm behind it, but it keeps moving. It had picked great camouflage. The fence and the robin very much looked the same, but the robin kept moving, whereas the owls, they really sit there still. So it allows you to for them, that's a survival thing. It allows them to basically blend in. So again, you can see another snowstorm or snow event, if you want to call it. I don't think it was really much of a storm, but you can see, again, she has to be on the nest and protect the little ones. Now, the little ones that thick down on them at that point, but still, even then, the weather can kind of protrude a little bit to, the wind, especially the wind can cut into their down and feathers a bit more. Now, notice that head wiggle there as well too. So for example, you'll get a little bit of a head wiggle, and that's them actually gauging distance as well. So that's how they may look at prey or in the distance, or just get a gauge on how far away you are as well too. So for example, the northern hawk owl can actually see their prey up to 1/2 kilometer away, and even a little bit further than that. So that is something that really does give you an idea on how powerful their eyesight is. Now, to give you a funny story, there was a year or so where I was spending a lot of time with birds. It was part of my birding project at that point. And I had spent so much time with owls that I remember pulling up to a stop sign, and I pulled up to the stop sign, and there was actually another sign blocking my view. And I did a little bit of a head wiggle around it too. And I said, whoa, I got to get back to civilization here, because I've been with the birds too much and they're starting to rub off on me. So it is kind of funny to see that aspect. And now you can see we have a fledgling at this point. Basically, this would be around middle of April. And you can see it's generally when they leave the nest, they go down low. I often see them on the smaller trees, and that as well too, because it's hard for them. They're not confident in really going up at that point. They tend to just want to get out of the nest and then get lower, and it can be quite awkward. And you'll get to see some of that in a little later on here too. You can see the impressive talons that they have as well too. So great horned owls actually have 4 talons, and 2 are forward, and then 2 are back, and that allows them to actually press 28 pounds of pressure on their prey. So basically they suffocate them. It also gives them tremendous balance as well too. And the reason why birds can actually stay in trees and not fall out of them, so even songbirds as well too, is what we see. So let's use the robin, for example. What we see as a knee is actually an extended foot bone. And when they're perched on a tree, when they're perched like that, it naturally grabs a hold. So that's how come they don't they don't sleep and fall out of trees at the same time. So you can see here the weather was kind of mucky and ugly. It was quite cool and damp, and the one had left the nest, but the other owlet was not out of the nest yet. I figured there might have been 3 eggs with this one, and one maybe failed, and that's why there was maybe such an age difference between the one owlet and the other one. Also here, I never got this close to the female, and I used the rain as cover because their hearing is actually tremendous. They have tremendous hearing. And so I was really surprised to get that close, but eventually she zeroes in on me. One of the neat things about their hearing capabilities is the fact that they have asymmetrical ears. So what you see above is horns. There's just feathers. They do kind of, I do believe they express emotion more than anything else, but on the side of their heads, there's actually ears. And see how their face is shaped like a disc? Well, that actually allows for the sound to funnel in better. And when that sound funnels in better, it actually allows them to hunt by sound. So as good as their eyesight is at night, they can actually hunt by sound as well too. So another owl, for example, that is tremendous when it comes to hearing and hunting is the great gray owl. It is one that can actually catch prey up to, I've read, 2 feet underground, so about 60 centimeters if the snow is soft, and they can just pounce and catch their prey that way. So that's tremendous, and that's as well. This one here again has left the nest. The whole family has finally left at that point. The little one was able to utilize natural things like the pine trees and that to get out of the nest. Actually, I was a little ahead of myself here. This one still hadn't left the nest. It took 5 days longer for this one to leave the nest compared to the first one. So that's why I believe there was potentially 3 eggs, and the middle one was the one that failed. And then we had the oldest and then the youngest that were there. And at one point I was actually concerned about this one because of the fact that again, with all the cold rain and that, it just did not seem to look well at times. So fortunately, on this one sunny morning, I think it was around April 24th, April 25th, the other one had left the nest as well too. So the whole entire family was happily out of the nest. You could see again, they're great at utilizing their camouflage. You can see the blend of the pine tree and the feather markings there as well too. So if you're ever looking for owls yourself, it is a great way to just look for a tree that looks wider than it should, because they often will tuck themselves up against the trunk, for example, or the main part of it. And one of the great things about the Niagara region for looking for owls, especially during the winter and the early spring, is the fact that a lot of our woodlands down here are fragmented. So you have the farmlands, and then sometimes you'll get an area where there's only maybe 100 meters by 100 meters of wooded area, and that's often where they go and nest. So I can drive down the road and basically spot a large nest, and if I see a circular head, then I think, oh, okay, that's going to be a hawk. And then if I see something with little tufts or points on top of it with a good size to it, then I know that's likely to be an owl. So I want you to note this crow that came in above here, because owls will eat crows. Actually, great horned owls are known to even eat skunks because they have a very poor sense of smell. So to have that in your diet, you would have to have a poor sense of smell. And there's a great example of the one little owlet, kind of jealous of the other one getting the attention and food from the other adult. So therefore, this one's decided, I gotta get higher, I gotta get noticed here. So again, look at the focus there, little head wiggle, and it's basically gauging its next move there. So it's kind of going to basically branch to branch to try to get itself higher there. So really need to see that process, see the thinking, and understand that it's food there, and then it's driving that. But then here's all the crows coming. So a murder of crows basically came in. I think there was around 8 that came in. So one crow led to 8 of them later on, and they even get pestered by the blue jays as well too. So you'll see it fly at the little one here again too. So they don't really get a lot of peace when it comes to that. It's you know, because of the fact they don't give other animals or birds a lot of peace too, because the great horned owl does eat quite a variety of food. Basically, that's why they're spread basically right across all of North America. Now we're going to take a look at sandpipers and semi-pennilated plovers, or different plovers as well too. And this is actually a great time of year to see them in, although we haven't had a lot of precipitation. I was just doing a little drive recently, and I did see a mud flat. I didn't see any shorebirds in it, but I did at least get a chance to see that they are there. And after maybe, well, it's not going to be much rain tonight, but if we do get a heavy rain, even into May, you'll stand a good chance of seeing some of these shorebirds. And here's an example of the Dunlins. So these Dunlins, you can see their feeding technique. They're feeding on insects and vertebrae, and you can see that quick diving. So anytime that you might even have a pond on your yard where it's at regular size, but then it floods after the winter into the spring, and then it starts to shrink back down again. They love to feed in that type of area as well too. So that's another option. And when they are migrating back through in the mid to late summer and fall, the Great Lakes shorelines are fantastic for it too. Lake Ontario as well as Lake Erie are both areas that I will see them along the shorelines. So generally the first shorebirds that I see back are the greater and lesser yellowlegs. And again, the best way to tell the difference is the greater yellowlegs will have a longer bill in its head, whereas the lesser has just the shorter bill. You can see that one feeding on a worm there at that particular moment. And we also have the common snipe. So you've heard the term before, sniper, and basically that stems from the fact that to be able to shoot down a common snipe, you actually have to be a really good shot because of their flying pattern. And so that's where that term came from. But you can see that when they're out there, and it's again a flooded field, and this time of year is great for it as well. You'll see kind of the butt wiggle and then that extremely long bill as well too. So this is what I meant by the lakes here. Lake Ontario in Grimsby, right across to St. Catharines are great areas. You can find a beach along there, and what you do is you actually stand in one spot and they'll walk past you because they're not too fearful of humans. And then we have the northern shrike, which is also known as the butcher bird, because they will actually hunt small songbirds. It kind of looks like a mockingbird, but it's not one that any songbird really wants to tangle with. And they will also hunt voles and mice. So this is kind of just to give you an idea of what they're looking at when they are hunting out there. So this is a vole just scurrying above. So for example, you know, owls and eagles and hawks can see that from quite a height, and it allows them to zero right in on it with their binocular vision. Then we have the eastern kingbird, and they're pretty cool in the way that you know, if you've got a country property, they tend to nest in the country more, but if you walk past their nest, they're not afraid to tangle with you as well too. So if you ever have kind of a white blackish gray bird diving at you, it's a good chance that there's a nest nearby, and at least that's when they're most aggressive. Then we have the great crested flycatcher, and this is one that I see actually where I live in Beamsville. Kinsman Park is a great area for them, as well as scarlet tanagers, orioles, red-breasted red-breasted grosbeak. So if you want me to say that name again at the end and you're not afraid of a little drive, then you know, Kinsman Park in Beamsville is a fantastic spot to go as well. This is the blue-gray gnatcatcher, and just like its name, it basically will perch on a twig or branch and then fly out and catch a bug in the air. And again, this time of year, generally I see them just a bit before some of the warblers come back. So they come back generally in the last week or so of April, and then into May you'll see them as well. There's the golden crown kinglets. I've already been seeing them. I was seeing them probably late March, in early April, and you'll see them again in the fall in October and November as well too, as they start to kind of pass back south. There's the that was the ruby, so there's the golden crown kinglet and the ruby crown. And I wanted to show you the brown creeper again because they are so hard to see. They do a technique where they flatten themselves on the tree as well too. It kind of looks like a bump. That's them hiding. And another hunting technique of theirs is to fly up to the top, or as they feed up the tree, they then swoop back down to the bottom of the tree as well too. There's the ruffed grouse. So the ruffed grouse is one that you'll see more so north of us. And but I have heard that they're in the Simcoe area as well too. So they're kind of part of the partridge family. And again, you can see how well they blend into their backgrounds. There's the spruce grouse. So this was actually photographed in the Algonquin Park area. Spruce Bog Boardwalk is the area that I generally will see them when I'm in Algonquin Park. So you can see that nice little red sash above the eye as well too. And they actually will feed even on basically the spruce needles as well. So they very hardy diet. So this is actually, I'm going to show you some weather and birds. This is a funnel cloud from last year over Crystal Beach, and then the geese flying through at the time. And here's water spout in the background. I'm at Morgan's Point with all the cormorants flying through. And then that's when there was actually the tornado by Welland in 2008. I was on it early on, then lost didn't get to see the tornado because it got rain wrapped, but you can see the geese flying through. Not the best V at that point either. And then Port Colborne here, and you can see a line of birds just in the water there, so geese flying or swimming through at that point. But one of the things that we get to experience here in the Niagara region is these roll clouds that will form. And on the front of these roll clouds, you actually get to see some neat things because birds like free rides. Why burn up energy when you don't have to? So in front of this roll cloud, I noticed that there's a bunch of birds in front of them. And they'll travel great distances along these because in front of these roll clouds, you have warm rising air. And of course, that creates lift. So here's an example from Jordan Harbor. This cloud is collapsing and there's a bit of a roll cloud feature there. Now it dissipates, but that continues to move towards the shore. So again, you can just see hints of this kind of rolling gust front. It disappeared again, and then finally it did come inland. And what's neat about it is it actually got quite breezy as it came in. There wasn't a lot of cloud to it, but just enough cloud to show what's going on. And that created lift right along the banks of the shoreline there. So it allowed me to see a bunch of different birds. I saw turkey vultures in it, I saw hawks, and mainly gulls will be what you'll see in them. But it's a neat way to see kind of how they utilize the natural weather phenomena to get that sort of thing. And same here. This is just before a tornado formed. So we have gulls that are flying on the backside of the rotating wall cloud. And they're basically getting out of Dodge. They're getting out of the area at that point where they're following the cold air that's wrapping around the back and heading towards much more stable air mass to the south there. And you'll just see it in the top corner here, the gulls flying through. So I will show you the tornado, just a quick bit of footage here of the tornado. It touched down about 3 or 4 minutes after the gulls flew through. And then you can see again, the there lasted for about 15 minutes. Now, as for here, again, I often see these convergence lines that form over Lake Erie. So you'll get thunderstorms, you'll get water spouts with them. Sometimes there's no thunderstorms, but it's just enough to create a barrier there where I've seen birds fly south and then birds fly back because of the fact that there's inclement weather between it and the American side of Lake Erie. But you can see here water spout in the background, and then we have the cormorants flying through. So water spouts generally form later in the fall because the lakes are warm still, and then we have cold air masses going over. So late summer and fall, you'll get those convergence lines. And so that kind of plays with the birds as well too. And then we have a long-tailed duck here. Notice the kind of the mist and steam in the background. Well, it was actually about -22 that morning, and any exposed water basically condenses instantly and gives you kind of that fog in the over the water there. So Arctic sea smoke is the technical name for it. Now you're seeing some more bloopers here, or attempt at flying shots before I do get the flying shots. Sometimes you time it well, but they just say, no, you're not getting a picture of my face as well, or I'm going to turn the other way and fly away from you, because you're kind of looking for a broadside shot most of the time. So here's again the kingbird blocking out my view. Then sometimes they fly directly towards you, so you can see out of focus, but the shed is still in focus. And then when they land again, of course, they go, hey, you know what? I'm going to hide behind a bunch of twigs as well, too. And here's an example of how quick they can be. Here's your goldfinch just sitting there, nice shot. And then the next shot just wasn't quick enough. I got about 4 or 5/6 of the bird there, so not much of it. Then we have a complete shot here where the goldfinch just took off and opened up for me. Same with the female. And if you have a bit of a headwind, it actually helps. If they fly into the headwind, it can actually slow them down, and that gives you a chance to photograph them as well too. There's the gray jay, common redpoll. So again, they feed a lot of the times on the grasses during the winter. So if you get flocks, it also gives you better pictures. There's a couple of the barn swallows. And robins, there's a partial albino or leucistic robin there, so basically has white pigment in the feathers. And you can see golden crowned kinglet. That was not a planned shot. I was basically taking a picture of it sitting, but they don't sit very long, so it was more of a flying shot. And then there's an example of the flock there with the common redpolls as well, so it gives you a bigger area of birds basically. And then killdeer there, not happy with each other, so they're quarreling. And the larger the bird is, the better chance you have of a flying shot, because they're slower, they're more direct, and you can kind of generally see the movement taking place. So you saw the snowy owls there. Short-eared owls are another good species to see. I've seen reports around Welland before, and I've seen them in other parts of Niagara as well too. So open fields, vineyard there, for example, right around sunset, generally after, but sometimes they come out about 10-15 minutes before as well too. And there's the red-tailed hawk. So I utilize the car as a blind quite a bit too. That's why I was able to get up basically right up underneath that red-tailed hawk. And there's another example of a headwind, the northern harrier. I was actually able to predict when it was going to land, because it was the winds were coming out of the southwest, probably around 30 to 40 kilometers an hour at the time. And again, flying shots, the more, especially the more you get to spend time with one. That owl, for example, I got to spend a month and a half with, which gave me a good amount of opportunities as well too. And now we're going to look after something that, in the next 3 weeks, especially in May there, the warbler sightings, it's a lot of what people go after. So it's what brings many birders out. So here's the blue-winged warbler. Its feathers usually aren't like that. The wind was just catching it a little bit. Then there's the Nashville warbler. So I've seen these at Beamer Conservation in Grimsby, but they will often pass through all of the Niagara region. The yellow warbler is generally the one that you'll see the most commonly in open areas with the small trees during the early or late and early summer. Chestnut-sided warbler, you can see tremendous coloration with it too. And what's neat about them is they're one of the few warblers that, this is an example of them in the fall, that don't change back to a basic plumage, where they generally look kind of a green and yellow or just all one color. There's the magnolia warbler, and then the Cape May warbler as well too, with the nice kind of rufous cheeks there. And the black-throated blue warbler, if you get them a little earlier in the day than this photo was taken, that blue can be really brilliant. It's very beautiful. It has a nice kind of iridescence to it. And then this is probably the most common warbler that you'll get to see in migration, is the yellow rumped warbler, also myrtle warbler basically. And we have the black-throated green warbler as well too. They'll be often in cedar trees is where I find them the most. And this is one that's sought after. They actually can have even more colors to them. That's the Blackburnian warbler. And this is a pine warbler male, and there's the female. They actually stayed all winter in the Dufferin Islands area, and that usually they go back to the lower US and even into the Central Americas. The palm warbler that you just saw, they pump their tail and often walk on the ground. You just saw the blackpoll warbler as well as the black and white warbler. So blackpoll has the dots more so, or flecks, and then the black and white has the streaking more. So you saw the American redstart, and this one's a neat name. It's called the ovenbird, often found on kind of forest floors or woodland floors. And then you can see the common yellowthroat here. So often I find them in cattail areas and ponds and marshes and that too, but mainly they really do like their cattail areas. And there's the hooded warbler. The hooded warbler is one that's not very common in Ontario, but during migration you can see them, and there's reports of them nesting in the Oakville area, Collingwood area, and then I think there's another area down towards Point Pelee. So not a lot of them, but if you have the chance to see them, they're definitely cherish it because they are hard to find. And that is the presentation. So I will now be opening up to question period here. And so, yeah, like I said, I did put into the chat some bird websites, audubon.org, as well as allaboutbirds.org. And another great website for Ontario bird sightings, and that is ofo.ca. It is one that you can, if you go to the photos section and go to current photos, you get to see the birds over the last 6 months, and they're generally the more rare birds that visit our province as well too. So that's kind of a nice nice thing to have as well. And then as for apps, my favorite apps have been the iBird Pro Guide to Birds and Audubon Birds of North America. And then another great one for, you take a photo of it and then it lines up pretty well on your phone for considering it is a photo, and it'll try to identify the bird or give you a range of them, is the Merlin Bird ID. So that's another app that's I recommend. And although I don't use binoculars myself, I've read about it in the sense of what's the best to utilize for spotting birds, and that is the 8x42. That seems to be a really just the sweet spot for birds. Not too close that you're you're having a hard time finding them, but not too far away that you can't get the enjoyment out of it too.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So with such a shallow depth of field, how are you focusing on the birds without the branches getting in the way, or is it a lot of hit and miss?
Oh yeah, there's times where basically when I first started doing photography, it was like, I just gotta get a picture of the bird. So there would be twigs and stuff in the way. And then eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, there's a twig in the way. I'm not even gonna lift the camera. I'm gonna wait for the bird to do its next move. So that's generally how I got my bird photos that you see in the presentation, because most of the time the ones with the twigs I don't even share per se, unless it's one that is a rare one or is just that's the only photo that I have of it, for example. So that's one of the reasons. And when it comes to depth of field, it's basically I do shoot very low aperture, but if I have it, say if I'm working out with the sandpipers and there's no twigs and stuff around, it's over the water and that, then I can go up to my aperture of f8 or f9 or something like that. It gives me a little bit more to it. But in the woods, I'm generally trying to get as much light as well too. So I go down to f4 is what my lens is able to do. So that's generally my technique when it comes to that aspect.
Cool.
Anyone else with questions?
Or that becomes a blooper, I guess, right?
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alicia. Yes, that's spot on. Yeah, it does eventually come a blooper. I figured, I probably got hundreds more of those too, where I was like, how can I actually make it kind of fun and put it into a show? I knew there was a reason I was saving my bloopers and that as well.
Well, with mirrorless in 12 frames a second, I'm sure you can get something.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't studied the mirrorless much yet, but I'm curious on reading.
Well, it's silent. You don't hear anything.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what's funny? Canon actually built a camera. I think it was the 7D, and they actually built a camera that had very little sound to it, but people didn't like it because they didn't have the sound to it. It didn't have the clicking of closing the, putting your card in and closing up. I'm sitting there thinking it's a fantastic camera. I don't care if I hear my camera or not, so, but yeah, the mirrorless aspect would be a nice aspect. I haven't gotten into it yet, but it will be.
Nikon's releasing a pro version this summer.
Nice.
Mirrorless.
Excellent. Well, that's anyone else with a question?
Everyone's quiet today.
It is quiet. Well, that's
well, or that's how thorough the presentation was. Is that we had? There was a couple when I was watching. I was like, "Oh, I'll ask this," and then 2 seconds later, you answered the questions.
Oh, okay.
It's very thorough and very informative.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that worked. I'm glad it worked out that way. we've been in sync before even the presentation started. I was thinking of the co-host aspect, and you literally, it was seconds after that. So we've been in sync this entire time.
Absolutely. Yes, we're definitely sharing a brain, and you clearly got most of it today. So I do want to thank you again for joining us with the Welland Library. We were able to record this, and we will be posting it on our YouTube page. So please feel free to share with your friends and colleagues as well. And then if there are no other questions.
Well, I had one, but I don't know if it's a good question or not.
I'm sure it is, please.
No such thing as a bad question.
Well, I have this robin. Well, robin made eggs or whatever, and they hatched and flew away. And the nest was on a tree outside my window. The next year, which was last year, they tried to make a nest on the windowsill, failed miserably, but you could see the mud and everything. So I went out and I bought, you know, those, not the ones with the holes in it, but the houses that are just like a piece of wood. Yeah. I nailed that to the wall. And then this year they came back, but they didn't even try to use that. They tried to make a mud on the sill that didn't work and then failed again. So is there, I guess there's a pattern that birds will come back to the same spot, even if another better, you know, luxurious is available to them.
Yeah, generally too with them, they're when it comes to their structures, they're very picky, obviously, and so it just appears that I think it is actually probably a different robin couple as well that potentially came back because of the fact that generally when they have success in a spot, they will go back to the same tree. So the success was in the year before, like you said, and then when they tried to go on the windowsill, it just didn't quite work out for them. So that's what I think happened there, is you just had a different couple that didn't necessarily know the right spot.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Okay, well, thank you once again, and please look forward to our other programming later in May as well. And then you can always contact us through our email, info@wellandlibrary.ca if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa and Annie, for organizing this. Fantastic work as usual. And just thank you to the Welland Public Library and everyone else that came here and shared this sunny day with all of us. I really appreciate it. And I hope that it's great weather for birding today too. So maybe you'll be able to get out this evening. So, but yes, thank you for coming out.
Yeah, I'm going to the garden center after this. So.
Excellent. Yes.
I'm already one step ahead of you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have one question. Fiddly-dee.
Oh, sure, Kathy.
I live in a construction area where they're doing a lot of construction. When I lived in Brampton, I had all kinds of birds because I had a bird feeder. And I would have like 20 ducks or something coming by my backyard. But in Welland here, because of the construction, and today I want to put out the bird feeder. But do you think that would be kind of a useless thing to do because there is so much construction?
How is your property for trees and other?
No trees.
No trees. Okay. Well, I mean, it's still worth a try. Generally, if you have, cedar trees offer them great protection.
I have one spruce tree, blue spruce tree.
Okay. I would then, if it's, as long as it's still clear to you to see them out the window, because that's what it's, really all about. Try putting it closer to at least the spruce tree, and that will give them a quick getaway if a predator like a Cooper's hawk or something comes in as well. So that would be my best bet, but I'd still say it's worthwhile because of the fact you may get some birds that are passing back through. For example, my feeder, I often see rose-breasted grosbeaks only maybe a couple days out of the year. And it's usually in that spring migration, and they'll use my feeders for a couple days and then they move on. So you might get to see a real treat like that, or maybe there's a nesting couple nearby that will make it part of their routine for feeding.
Right, and you think again, what we used to do is bringing in the feeder at nighttime because there's just so many animals in the area, right?
Yes, yeah, yes. Coons, coons love to raid them, don't they?
Yeah. So yeah, that's why I thought bringing it in the evening, but I want to set it up today.
Yes. Well, I still say go ahead. I still think it's worthwhile doing. So.
Okay. Hot dog. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone take care and thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Annie and Lisa.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes. I want it.